So my plan here is to actually use a mind map and create the mind map in a group all about the topic that I'm talking about here. This is not going to be anything, I said no slides, and it's no slides, it's just, it is a computer because that's going to work best here. And I started off with an empty mind map with it just says modernization, which might be a little small, but we'll see how this works. Yep. There we go. So we're going to start off by discussing DevOps. And when I just talk about DevOps, do people have thoughts about what is DevOps? And I know we're going to be handing around mics. There's going to be discussion. So that's sort of the goal here. Does anyone have any thoughts about what their thoughts on what DevOps is? Okay. We need the mics.
The process of building, installing, and releasing software.
Okay.
The team that develops the software is also the one that operates it, deploys it, and operates it.
Okay. So, sorry about that. I'm looking at different people.
I would say it's a guidance on the principles used to make the process of developing software easier.
Okay. Interesting how many different things we're getting here already, which is always a good thing.
I'll add to that a mindset of enabling an organization to continuously deploy changes.
So, right?
It's a life cycle process of delivering and maintaining software over time.
Can you repeat that?
A life cycle process of delivering and maintaining software over time.
There's a process.
A continuous feedback.
And by the way, I agree with all these, and I'm not debating any of them right now. I mean, for me, it's many of those different things. There's the technical parts of it, and then there's the people part of it, right? Of bringing development with operations together, which is the people part, we can say. And there's also the technical part of bringing, everyone talks about CI/CD is the other term a lot of people use, right? Continuous integration, continuous delivery. And both of those things, and CI is usually associated with development teams, and CD is with the delivery or operations team. And again, I can probably make this mind map a lot neater by moving things around and putting them into groups, because I think of those two groups, the personal part and the technology part, and then go from there. Do people have different opinions of that, or? Sure. One second.
Thanks. I was just going to say, the one word I didn't see there is automated.
Automation. I'll put it.
Yeah. So nothing applies on it at all.
It's a good one. As I said, I want to do this as a group because that's the way these things work and all.
Yeah, in a more macro level, I think it's, to your point, I'm over here.
Okay, sorry. I see a mic and a mic.
It's really looking at the whole thing as a value stream, because you're doing development and ops, and all creating more value. It's really what it is, which is typically different silos previously.
But by the way, quick, yep.
Yeah. Merging the software development and the IT function.
Okay. Okay, so, yep, one more and then we'll move on to the next thing.
I'd add automated testing into that as well.
Okay. Let me put automation in here, so I'll probably put So just out of interest, a quick show of hands, how many people have used mind maps for things before? Fair number? Good. Most people? I love using mind maps, so that's just why I chose this. And usually I would group them if I was doing a little more time here and spend a few minutes on making it look prettier. But and maybe I'll do that before I give it out. We'll see. Next thing, which the topic I spend a little time on, and is legacy. So, because this talk is supposed to be about both things, right? What do people think of legacy, if I say the word? What? Mainframes was what was said. Something near and dear to my heart as part of my company. Speaker not working?
That's on. The best definition I ever heard of legacy was anything that's in production.
In production. In some ways that's true, but all right, this one over here raised.
Monolithic applications.
Monolithic applications.
Under legacy, I would put organizational norms and culture.
Organizational norms and culture, okay.
One of my favorite definitions, a little tongue-in-cheek, is anything without tests is legacy, because it's like you're so afraid to touch it.
Anything without tests?
Yeah.
I can add to that. Any code that you didn't write.
Any code you didn't write?
This is a characteristic, so brittle.
What? Brittle. Okay. And by the way, let me make a couple quick comments on some of this. I work with a lot of companies that, like banks and things like that, that might have brittle code to some extent, but they actually have a whole suite of tests because of regulations. That's very legacy mainframe. They're actually scared to change it, mostly because all their tests might break whenever they make modifications because it's a monolithic application. So a lot of these things I hit on, sometimes they have a lot of tests, they just don't have the same type of tests we're used to in sort of a more modern world. And I'm not debating what's right, what's wrong. I'm just saying that for a lot of those types of companies, it's just that the rest of it that's a problem with updating them.
I would say it's mission critical and maintenance nightmare put together.
Mission critical and maintenance nightmare. Sorry, my typing could use some desiring here. That's what happens when you're standing trying to type.
Deprecated software versions.
Deprecated software versions. It's a good one too.
I have one here,
Okay.
something that keeps being on my list.
Something that what? Something that pays your bills? Okay.
Okay?
What?
Yes. The existing body of knowledge.
Existing body of knowledge. Hearing lots of different thoughts about some a little more positive, some being questioning, and that's all part of it, right? For a lot of these legacy systems. Yep.
We relate to the maintenance nightmare, full of technical debt.
Technical debt. That could be related to a few of these things, right? So, I mean, it's true. I mean, for a lot of people, it's mission critical. For a lot of people, because of regulatory, they can't get rid of it for a variety of reasons, right? Some you might be able to, but it might be too expensive to do. There are a lot of things that happens which keeps it in place. And there's some things that can be eventually moved, but you have to figure out a good way to do that and have some kind of, probably a phased migration type path. I'm not saying that everything has to stay forever, but I'm saying you have to figure out a way to make that work. So, do we think we covered these pretty well here? The basics about what DevOps is, what legacy is, right? Next question, and I like bringing up all of these. How do you bridge the gap? Because there is a gap here in some cases, right? We've already talked a little bit about. And the first question is why? What are the problems we're trying to solve? If legacy can stay forever, why do people care? And for me, one of the major reasons why is because of new channels. Do people want to bring up what kind of channels they see as new channels, interesting things, like reasons they would interact with legacy system? What? Web, mobile. Anything else?
Yeah.
What?
Artificial intelligence.
AI. Okay. Sorry, I put a heater. I'll add one which is, which I shouldn't stop tabbing, but cloud. Just sort of the same, right? And we can say that a lot of the AI stuff works in the cloud is part of the problem. We can argue that it's AI, it's ML. Yep.
IoT.
IoT. That's another good one. I come from that world myself. I did a long time working in embedded systems for many, many years.
APIs, interactivity.
APIs and interactivity is what was mentioned. I got it. APIs and interactivity. That's actually going to be in our next one, which is going to be integrations. But we'll cover that in a minute. Any other things on channels? Voice. Okay, I'll hit on that one in 1 minute. Just putting APIs in here.
Data sciences, analytics.
Voice.
Raise your hand high.
Yeah, data science. He said data science. And analytics. I'm just putting that underneath AI. I mean, it's not always there, but I'm just trying to group a few things. Yep, what?
Terminals.
Terminals. Is that part of a new channel or an old channel? That's definitely a legacy channel, and we still see a lot of those, right? Well, I'm gonna actually have an example later on as part of my value mapping. I'm gonna do in a few minutes, which will be talking about one of those terminals. Of course, never can get away from them, right? So, we covered a reason why we want to actually integrate, not just DevOps, but in general integrate into modern world, right? And we covered why we want to take some of the mainframes, I'm going to call it mainframes, legacy systems in general, all those types of things, and bring them in. DevOps is just a means for something, right? For faster delivery, a lot of the other things we're talking about. But we're really discussing getting to new channels. And then how do we maintain stuff in those channels, right? So the next thing I'd like to talk about is integrations. Someone brought up APIs already, which is a good one for that's one of the ways we do integrations. But what have been the ways we've done integrations in the past?
Enterprise Service Bus?
Yep, ESB. He said Enterprise Service Bus, which is ESB or SOA.
File exchange.
File exchange, that's another great one. Batch updates. Sorry, I knew this was going to happen. At least I'm repeating them to try to, so everyone else can hear it on it. I kind of expected that may happen eventually. Microservices are a more modern one. And microservices actually kind of fit under here, right? They sort of fit underneath, because usually you're using a microservice to show an API. And we can discuss what are the other types of APIs? Or what are the types of APIs? Past, future? What?
REST APIs.
REST, SOAP.
SQL.
SneakerNet? Over here.
Sneakernet?
SneakerNet, that's the.
That's the old one, right? Which sort of fits with file exchange, I think.
Great, guys. RPC?
RPC? Yep. That's sort of an old one, too, in most cases. So, yep. Screen scraping. And that's still done, by the way, a lot. That's not quite an API. That's more like a way to get the data out, right? To build your APIs. In fact, my company still does some of the screen scraping if people are using screens. And we can discuss that a little later on, but we actually have a really interesting case study we're doing right now where we're screen scraping one of the large insurance companies' screens they use everywhere and allowing them to do that. So, and I probably should group these again, but I'm not doing a good job of grouping them. That's life when you try to do this on fly. So we've hit on a lot. There's actually a new one people didn't bring up. Things like Node.js and Lambda functions. If people are doing serverless, right? You can call it whatever you like. So that's one of the most modern ones, right? Is kind of serverless with functions. Right? I'd say the two that are popular right now are mostly serverless and REST. I mean, microservices are usually helping implement the REST APIs, right? They're the ones that people are trying to go to at least. I'm not saying the other ones aren't used everywhere. I'm just trying to, mention some of the things that we see to be the most common, popular ones for people doing development today. And it makes a lot of sense why, right? They're easy to use. They make a lot of sense. Yep.
One more would be queuing systems.
Queuing systems?
Yeah.
That's a good one. And where do you think that goes? Is that just a separate one?
I think it's actually belongs to the APIs.
Okay. Here's an interesting question about the queuing systems. And we think of queues, a lot of people will group them actually underneath ESBs and things like that, because it's a bus which then does a queuing system as part of that. They're more general purpose, right? MQ and those types of things. The question becomes, for us at least, a lot of our customers are looking to not do that as much anymore for a variety of reasons, mostly because the cloud is fast enough and the mainframes are fast enough. The main reason why I did it before was the mainframe was fast enough to respond. It would queue things up, but the other system couldn't respond fast enough and wasn't always ready. But that's not a problem anymore. So we're seeing more customers go to direct REST inside a microservice, which just passes the data instead of queuing. But in some cases, you need it. I'm not saying you never need it, but you want to think of the business case you need it for, rather than just say, I'm always going to use a queue. So that's one that I probably, if I had to put this one, I'd probably think about putting it here. Oh, wait. Here we go. It's not the only place it can go, because you can use queues everywhere, but that's a good one. So we've hit a little bit on all these different topics. And as I mentioned, there's a lot of these things. The other thing I'll kind of group together, at least in my mind, certain things are more kind of cloud native. This is just from my experience. Things like REST, it doesn't have to be cloud, and microservices, right? People tend to deploy them. They're looking to deploy microservices in the cloud inside of containers with that. And by the way, I'll also put one more in there, which is the other one I brought up. Right? And that's why those ones are becoming the most popular. It's not the only reason, but they're more cloud friendly in general. Yep.
I guess we also have the container development.
Container development, which is usually things inside of microservices, but not always. You can put anything inside a container, right? I'm just saying that people are starting to like to use microservices inside the containers in many cases, and then deploy them. Even though you can put lots of different applications in there. So, any questions so far on what we're building here? Just trying to go through all these different topics and have a discussion about these things. And if you really want to get to things like DevOps, which I discussed earlier, you're going to want to probably be using some of the cloud native more ones. Just because that's the nature of it, right? And that's also the ones people are looking to do for modern development. I'm not saying it's the only way. It just makes it a lot easier. And that's what the DevOps tools, by the way, are used to dealing with in terms of APIs.
And one question.
Sure.
When you talk about integration, I was thinking of Agile development, but perhaps that might be under DevOps instead.
I think Agile development, I think, is mostly underneath DevOps. I was surprised, actually, since we're in an Agile crowd, that no one said in DevOps that it's the next generation of Agile. Now, we can argue over whether that's true or not and how technically and everything, but a lot of people think we took Agile for the developers, and now we're bringing Agile to operations or to the grouping together. Because Agile is always about cross-functional teams working together. This is just adding to the cross-functional team. So in an Agile crowd, in some ways, I honestly forgot earlier, but I expected that to come up early, and it didn't. So that's a great point right there. So, but that's just, since we're in an Agile crowd, I think everyone just sort of ignored that almost, more so than other crowds sometimes.
I always refer to DevOps as the end of the Agile story.
Yep.
This is the end, this is the payoff.
We'll see. People always find another thing to do, right? I mean, I guess I've seen Agile become lean manufacturing and lean, which then changes Agile a bit more, right? At the same time. And then it goes across the whole organization rather than just being in the development and operations. But from a product perspective, it is sort of the end point. We can argue. But from the rest of the whole changes, I'm not discussing that whole topic, but with organizations and everything else, it's not necessarily the end. That's my quick thoughts on that. Anything else? Anything we missed here so far? Nope. So I promised one more thing in my talk. I'm not going to do this on this. I'm probably going to have to use another tool to do this. But some value mapping. But before I jump into value mapping myself, my question is, what do people think when I say the term value mapping? Sorry, never get to sit down in this one. I told you. Yep.
I'm just curious, what's the difference between
Sure.
that? I'm curious about the difference between value mapping and value stream mapping. Is it the same thing?
Pretty much the same thing. I mean, I don't. And you can also, some people talk about user journey mapping, which is very similar. Depends whether you're focusing on the user or what type of journey. But it's generally the value for the user and for the company as they go through the process.
That makes me think of story mapping.
Story mapping. Let's put that in here.
Chain of events that lead to business value.
That's a pretty good definition. Chain of events. Okay.
Eliminating waste.
Eliminating waste. I think that's an output of it, right? Or that's a goal, at least, of it. It's not the only goal, because another big goal is understanding your users better, right? Because that's a totally different thing.
Here's another one. Bringing order to chaos.
Users. Oops. Bring order to chaos.
It's end-to-end view of
key processes.
Yep. I think that might fit. Yep. Try to type these fast.
I think I would say it's actually understanding how your business operates.
Understanding your business?
Understanding how your business actually does what it does.
Okay. I'll put that here, actually.
Actually works.
Right? It's sort of bringing order to chaos. I'll put those two things together just for.
Maybe.
It's not perfect, but for mind mapping, it's not bad.
Customer focused.
Customer focused. I think, yep. I like that further. I like that further clarification. Customer versus user, which are two slightly different things, anyways, but they kind of come together in many ways. Okay, so I'm just throwing things out here and trying to think of things. What I was going to do next was I was going to show you a very quick value map, maybe for a made-up use case first of something that has some legacy integration type things, but something that's common. Then I was going to tell you a real story of my own about one, and we can do these fairly quickly. And then we're going to do a quick 5-10 minute exercise where we're going to have you guys think of one in small groups, 2 or 3 people. Groups. And then we'll do the last quick session. So I'll try to do these really quickly, and then we'll go from there. Everyone having fun? So this is, let me see if this works. There we go. This is draw.io. The last tool I used was MindMap. You can use anything you want. There are a lot of mind mapping tools out there. MindMap is a free one from that comes off the Google Drive. And draw.io is a free drawing tool on it. It's not really a journey mapping tool per se. Most of them I find were a little more complex than I want to try to do on a simple thing here. I just want to draw some blocks and draw some relationship between the blocks. And this is a tool I use to do that in my work all the time. Okay, let's start off with a person. This person I probably should name, but I'll keep it really simple at the moment, is building widgets and decides to want to sell the widgets and puts them on Etsy. I'm no expert on Etsy. I don't use it because I don't really build widgets. I don't even shop that much. My wife does. She loves shopping for stuff. And somebody else, let's just say, wants to buy it. Who sees it and wants to buy it. Again, it could be my wife's knitting, which she does, whatever it is, and probably off their mobile phone, which I can put up there. So when we start to do this, we actually have things like FedEx in here, and a lot of these other systems that all use the FedEx and the driver. And then we have the tracking software, which goes to FedEx. And then we have the truck, which is actually being tracked. All those things are either embedded systems. They're all, some of them are legacy systems. FedEx has a lot of legacy in what they do. And they're all integrations between all those things to make that whole value chain basically work. For somebody selling something and for somebody else actually getting it and delivery on time and everything else. And you can build out your whole value map by doing that, is the whole idea here. So usually I do this, and I'm trying to keep this really short, and I'm not going to spend too long trying to do this. But you try to draw the FedEx, and you try to draw the mobile phone, and you try to clean that all up. And then that's a bunch of different things, which actually have a lot of different legacy systems as part of it. And a lot of different IoT, possibly devices like mobile phones. I don't consider it much IoT, but the tracking inside the truck certainly is. And all of that together. So you build the value map, and you actually show out the different pieces of it, and you show where any problems happen. Sometimes shipping takes too long, or something gets lost, or whatever. There are a lot of different things that can go wrong as part of that system. That's a real simple value map. Now, I wanted to bring up a very specific legacy one that I once had myself. Actually, about a year ago, I joined my company. I had to travel to Israel because my company is actually an Israeli company. And so I booked through Travelocity, no big deal there. I couldn't print out my ticket because I'm traveling internationally. And you have to show your passport. But you're supposed to show it at the scanner at the automated system and actually print it out. And it just didn't work. It scanned it, and the woman came over, tried to help me. She couldn't help me. And then she pointed to this other guy who had to go into a system. I had to wait like 10 minutes for him because he's busy helping a bunch of other people. He had to go into a legacy system with a green screen and literally do something. He didn't tell me what. And all of a sudden, mine worked. So something was missing in the system they'd built on those automated self-help ones. They no longer had anybody at the desk who could do it. And they had this weird little green screen that was like literally you had to walk inside and had to do this thing and print out the ticket. Never said to me what was wrong. He said, nothing was wrong with my ticket. Was all he said to me. But I had to wait a while for this guy to basically be the one person who knew how to use this old green screen to actually get it to work. And I'm laughing because I've been with this company for like 2 months, a company that does legacy integration to green screens and to non-green screens, COBOL, whatever. And here I am having a green screen problem in supposedly an automated real process. That's a little story that was about March of this year. I started this company in January. So that's my story of a legacy system that I interacted with since joining this company. Now let's try to break up 3 people, whatever, roughly, groups, and just try to think of like one example that you guys can kind of value map kind of quickly together. That make sense? And then we'll come back and we'll sort of discuss 1 or 2 of them and move on. All right? Small groups, whatever. You can mention 1 or 2 examples.
I can start out. So we talked about the microphone that you plug into your iPhone, and when you upgrade, the connections are different.
Okay.
And then we started talking about all the different, it's not that one person, but we came up with like 10 different people and we worked on involved in, getting that music to you.
Okay.
Okay. So describe the value map that we made?
Yeah.
Okay, so we did it for a customer reporting event, like to report a defect.
Okay.
So we just walk through the stage, start with the customer and the defect, and then you report it to the support person. You log it, goes for analysis, prioritize, gets kind of transferred over to the product owner, add it to a queue, and then eventually you pull for work, so you've got your tech team, scrum team, whatever it is. You get your sprint, end up with a workable solution, a working solution, you deploy it, it goes back to the customer, and then they verify it, and may or may not have the process all over again.
Okay, I didn't quite get all that, but I got some of it as best I could.
You got all of it?
What? That's fine. Another one? Right here? Yeah. He's bringing.
We did commuter rail. Traveler who has 3 ways to pay, either a kiosk or a phone app or the conductor.
Okay.
And those all go to the pay system that goes to the train. And the problem came up is that they took the kiosk away. They didn't tell enough people. So people suddenly found themselves with no good way to pay for the train.
And we have a monopoly, that's what happens, right? Want to do one more? Anyone else? Right there?
Yeah, so we looked at the poor guy who has to help us Wi-Fi a computer. So Gary's going to describe our value map here.
Pretty exciting. This team put together a great value stream map of the Wi-Fi and PC, the husband.
soliciting referrals from that PC, where we should go. We decided to go to the Genius Bar at the Apple Store. We research the devices that are available, and we bring said wife to the store to evaluate the devices that are on display. After returning home, we had a very fruitful discussion around finances. We balanced budget versus need. Then we create a short list of the devices. Then we have a diverging branch. We can either go new, or we go back to the Apple Store and then buy a device there, or we can go used, resale website. Either way, we end in receiving the device, which completes our value stream.
Yeah, I don't know if that until end of life of the device. I'm not sure it ends the value stream. You have to go back to the Genius Bar once anything goes wrong with it, et cetera, et cetera. I recently, on this laptop, which I got, which refurbished, the battery died, and it's one of the ones where the battery's sort of embedded. So you had to bring it in, and you literally couldn't get it yourself. You couldn't buy one. So you had to literally go to the store, and the Genius Bar wouldn't do it, by the way, because it's one of the older ones. There's a store up in Alston where you had to go do it. And it was still not cheap. And my company bought it for me, and I'm like, well, okay. Anyways, it's a good computer. I'm not complaining with that. I'm just saying it's interesting, the whole value chain for that. So, I guess we covered most of the topics there, including all the value mapping. I wanted to actually bring up quickly an example from a customer of the actual integration, all that stuff that we've been discussing here. And this particular customer, which I mentioned in my stuff, is called Ayalon Software in Israel, Ayalon Insurance in Israel. Their problem was they have an old AS400, if people know what that is, mid-frame machine, for all the stuff they do, and they openly say this is on one of our webinars, very public, and their problem was IT was the bottleneck. Okay, now we're not arguing over all that point. For when they did new contracts, and so they said we're going to solve this with DevOps. That was their idea already. Okay, but they're like, how are we going to do DevOps with a legacy system and make it all work? And that's why they came to us. And I'm not going to go through all the nitty gritty, but essentially what happened in the end was they actually got their DevOps process, and they were done 2 months before they actually signed the contract, because it takes a while to sign the contract, with a new bank for actually using their insurance with their customers. And they're very happy with that. I'm not claiming everything was us. A lot of it was them following a DevOps process with all the new DevOps tools, but we expose the APIs. That's what our company does, is allows companies to expose APIs using our tooling. So really the whole idea was their biggest problem, bottleneck, was the fact that they had not a mainframe, but AS400, a legacy system, and how do they integrate that to a cloud-native DevOps environment? So that was basically it, and there are some interesting, we have a webinar which is where they discuss this and talk about it, but in general, that's the problem a lot of people have when they try to go to a DevOps process using a legacy system. How do they actually expose it as cloud native? Not with ESB and SOA and these other things, which then are hard to actually build. They take too long to meet a real DevOps process. So if people have more questions about that, I can answer them. But that was really the example I wanted to at least mention here of a case where that really happened to us. So any questions on all of this? I know I did questions all the way through, so people might be burned out from talking. Or if you have a question for me afterwards, I'm here and I even live in the area, so. Everyone's quiet. Yep. Mike, come in.
So, I'm just curious, how does, this so far, enabling a legacy system to be a DevOps system?
Yep.
And how do you connect that up with the value stream mapping process?
So the question is, how do you connect it up with the value stream process? And that's a great question. Their value stream, in their particular case, I'll use Ayalon as an example. Their value stream map was it was taking them too long to be able to sell to their customers. That was their value stream map, not necessarily their end customer value stream map. And too long after they signed a contract, they usually were waiting a few months. So not only was it a longer development time, but it also was longer to revenue. And DevOps is what shortened that cycle by getting the specific APIs that they wanted out and available to them so they could then integrate to the bank's system. So for them, their value stream map was that problem of the development and IT taking too long to write the integration to their customer, the bank, to sell to the end customers. So that's where the value stream map for them came into play. They took a look at that and said, this is killing us. Because we can't sign these contracts and then wait a few months and not get revenue. And the development took longer. Both things. Yep, another question back there.
I have another
Oh,
question,
one more.
but if you want to
Okay.
go something else.
He already has a mic.
Why does we have to associate DevOps with cloud? DevOps is just, if you ask every third person, you'll get a different definition. And
Sure.
also, if it's the process and how you integrate your whole chain, it doesn't have to be cloud. And the way everything is going on, most of the people are thinking about multi-cloud, or some people are even getting out of it.
That's true. I mean, I'm not saying that DevOps has to be in the cloud. In their case, they had to integrate from bank in one place to their own system. They wanted to use the cloud to help connect them. Actually, in their case, they used a private cloud to do that. It doesn't have to be public cloud for sure. It's just that I should say DevOps is usually done with modern tools. And a lot of those tools that are designed for the automated testing, and a lot of those things are working in more modern systems. It's not a requirement, by the way. There are companies like we work with CompuWare who basically do mainframe development, and they're pushing DevOps for the mainframe, right? Broadcom has actually been doing a lot of that too, most recently. So what I'm going to say is you can do DevOps on the mainframe. The problem is if you're integrating from there to somewhere else, a lot of times you're going through the cloud or some kind of API to connect those two, something that's always up. And that's where the integrations a lot of times go through the cloud. Does that help answer the question? Yep.
I'm just curious, you talked about a way by which you expose the APIs, the tool that you're talking about,
Right.
Is that a unique thing, or is that just one of the many that are available in the marketplace?
It's fairly unique. Our tool is fairly unique in the sense that a lot of the other ones are based on more ESB SOA type setups instead of being truly cloud native. That's the unique part of it. Because a lot of them were these legacy ones that sort of have been doing it for a while using middleware. And that's where they kind of break down on some of the DevOps, because every time you change anything, you have to go through a queue, and that's all built in, and then you have to rebuild that, and it slows down the whole testing process. So ours is more unique because it's a cloud-native automatic generation to like a mainframe. Or an AS400 or something. And we do it really fast. We automate the whole generation process of it. Whereas a lot of times you have to build facades on a legacy system. So a lot of other technical differences between us and most of our competitors. Yep.
So I understand it. I'm going to play back what I think I heard.
Sure.
So we have this problem where we need to modernize.
Yep.
And we use a value chain to visualize what that modernization could or would or should be. And then we apply the techniques of DevOps, which is somewhat more agile than the traditional, to look at how do we create that in a way that's sustainable.
Yeah, that's the basic goal of it. And you a lot of times want to use things like RESTful APIs and things like that because those are the common APIs people want to use. And they want to use things like microservices because they're small, self-contained entities. They're easier to work with DevOps.
Right, but DevOps itself is the process of looking at how do I pull all this together and do it in a way that's maintainable over time.
Yes, so you can, every time you do a new integration, a new test, it's really fast to do and quick.
Right,
And it automates the process.
We just sort of cobbled things together and we had a Rube Goldberg contraption that worked, but
Well, I mean,
it was not maintainable necessarily.
one of my last companies, we built an application and we were trying to just get to DevOps. Not trying to get to DevOps, just trying to get to CI, continuous integration, which is part of DevOps, right? And our problem was that our tests took too long. And so we figured out a way to automate more of the tests They figured out a way to make the builds, to abstract the builds from each other, from the different components, componentize things more. And then as we did that, we could get to the point where we could do more continuous integration, right? We weren't trying to get to,
Really creative construction where you're trying something and then you're finding the next bottleneck, you're breaking it again, reforming it, breaking it again, reforming it.
Right, and we knew kind of where the bottlenecks were and why the testing was taking so long. So, and some of it was because we had to wait for some, by the way, this was testing on HPC, high performance computing machines. So some of it was waiting even for our customers' machines to be available, and some of those tests we took out of the loop for our regular testing because they didn't affect all the other testing and only did those periodic. So there were different decisions we made, but we were just trying to get to a continuous integration. We'd never expected continuous delivery because we actually deployed at customer sites. That's a piece of DevOps in the process. Yep, he's pointing, yep. Go there and then we'll go there.
Yeah, the question, since clouds come up so often, I found the cloud, the idea of a cloud, unintended, kind of nebulous. And 4 questions that came up on the cloud. Who owns it? Who maintains it? How is it paid for? And who's responsible for either a failure or a security violation in the cloud?
I mean, that's a very interesting question. All those questions are very interesting questions, and it depends which cloud you go with and what level of pieces they have, right? In some cases, I mean, if you're talking about an AWS, which has lots of different options in their cloud, they might, if they're going to full serverless, then they maintain basically everything, and all you do is provide a function, which is usually just connecting either a legacy system to another system or something else, and all they're doing, and they provide everything else. But they charge you a little extra. They do charge it via usage, so if you're not using it as much, it doesn't kill you. Other ones give you private clouds and say, basically, here's your system, we'll maintain the basics of the system, but you would install everything, the containers, everything else. Sometimes when you get to more like the high performance computing I was talking about a few minutes ago, where you're doing high level analytics on these big machines, sometimes they really talk about bare metal cloud. And they mean literally a machine they give you native with this is the type of stuff you get, and it's a cloud that they own, but they basically, everything else you build on it, including your security and other stuff in many cases. So it varies which public, private clouds, et cetera, and you have to look through those contracts or whatever you're doing with any cloud vendor and figure out. Because all those questions change based upon which one it is my take. Yep.
I have a question. The difference between what you might call a legacy system, what you might call a new style system, DevOps. I have designed and worked on multiple complex systems, like, for example, an air traffic control system, where you have the control plane, the data plane, the radar system, and then you do object-oriented modularized design, where you chop up the pieces and modularize it and into pieces with the correct API between them, with failing points and error correction points, and also logging points between multiple systems, and you design it in such a way which is very modularized. We call it a legacy system. We never use the word DevOps to it. We never use Agile to it, but it's fault tolerant. It cannot fail because the plane will crash, and you don't want to fly a plane to go there to fix it. It will fail.
Oh, I know, I come from that world too. I mean,
So when you think about that, what do you call a legacy system? And what do you call DevOps? What do you call Agile? Because we have done all those things before.
Sure, I agree. I think it's just another, I mean, DevOps is a little different because DevOps usually means deployment much faster.
We can deploy multiple different modules. We replace more modules. We define what's called a replaceable unit. So you don't go and fix a transistor. You go and take out the whole box, plug a new box in. As a radar system, a CPU or one box fail is modular. You replace that whole box for that radar system. Let's say your control system, air traffic control, your screen died. You replace that circular screen on your tower. Things like that. So they are modularized. They are replaceable unit. They do have their own error correction, error diagnostic within each box to tell you outside the box what broke and what you need to replace. So those are all built in. You just have to pay extra money for it.
Yeah, and it's hardware versus it's hardware with software built
There's a
into
lot
it.
of software in there too. So
Yeah, sure.
do you call that legacy system, or do you call that already modularized, DevOpable system?
I mean, it's a good question, and I don't know if I have the full answer for that. I mean, I've seen systems where legacy is a very nebulous term. I'll say that from the get-go. Because some things on mainframes are pretty modern, right? You can build Java applications with new modern things with DevOps on a mainframe. You can build a lot of these systems, and I've dealt with a lot of those systems. I come from the modeling world for embedded systems myself, where I've worked with a lot of customers that do air traffic controllers. So I've actually done a fair amount of those types of things, and I agree that a lot of the stuff we do in DevOps, we've done before. I do think that there is, when we're talking about deploying just software all the time, like a Facebook or something like that, it's very different than an air traffic control system. Does that make one legacy and one not?
And one doesn't fail. That's what you
Right. Well, yeah, sure. And in DevOps, in some ways, if you fail more often, in many cases, particularly on those systems, because it's considered okay. If the screen doesn't quite work right, if they can fix it quickly, that's what's more important to them than not having a failure. And I started this whole thing when I said about like a bank. Banks can't fail on the transactions from many things, right? They're very fault tolerant, but we call them legacy systems on the mainframes. They might be slower to change in many cases and update in part because of the regulatory and because of the rules they have to even update it. But they're much more fault tolerant in many ways than a lot of these other systems.
And they're more modularized.
Sure.
Module is like microservice.
Sure.
Just map to different things. You don't have to be sitting on a VM or a
Sure.
container in the cloud.
Let's just,
I just wanted to add to that, because I think it's just a great example and a great question, and I think it gets to the core of what legacy systems are all about. I don't think it has anything to do with if it's mainframe or hardware or software. I think it just really literally is this something that we really wish we didn't have in our company, but we haven't figured out how to get rid of it yet? Versus like in your,
Pays the bill. I mean, what he mentioned earlier.
yeah, versus like in your case, I mean, it could be using technology from that might seem old school, but it's still kind of the cutting edge of what, and central to kind of how you just decide to do it. I think that's not legacy in my opinion.
right. I mean, I agree. I think legacy, as I said, was a bit nebulous in some ways, and it's always in the eye of the beholder.
And it's judgmental.
And it is judgmental. I agree with you, and that's right. Sure. We got one.
Yeah, so legacy, we have sort of a, I know it when I see it, feel for it. How about the other end, DevOps? Do you have a definition? We've got a lot of attributes of DevOps. Do you have a definition for what you would consider to be DevOps?
That's a great question. I mean, there's definitely a continuum of DevOps, I guess I'll say, right? I mean, there's people who are doing continuous integration. And it's usually, if you're succeeding in doing continuous integration, continuous delivery in fast cycles, is usually what people think of as being DevOps, if you've done that. Now, I know that I mentioned earlier the people part of it is a big part of that because you're not going to get there without that. But I'd say that if you're doing CI/CD successfully in rapid increments. Now, how fast that is depends on which company and depends on what you're doing. Some people talk about many times a day, and some people talk about, once a week. I mean, so it depends on the company. But I think if you're achieving those goals of hitting continuous integration and continuous delivery, and you can do testing kind of quickly, and you have everything modularized in that sense, then you're getting to DevOps. I mean, those are the technical ways to talk about it. I know there's also the people ways, which is a different thing. But most of the people stuff is to get the technology done right.
So I think we all kind of have a great feel for how to do the technical side of going to DevOps or what the differences are. What I see is some challenges with, oftentimes you have legacy organizations that you're trying to transition, and I've seen lots of challenges in being able to do that. Where I've seen the greatest success is where you're coming in and creating a new solution, and it's kind of ground up, and then you're not doing this transition. So my question is, so how do you deal with the people organizational side of this? Because like I said, the technical side seems to be straightforward if people agree on the interfaces and things like that, but then the whole thing of am I working on legacy or not, and how much of it is legacy seems to be a big issue for companies that need to transition.
I think there are a lot of valid problems with it too, right? Because sometimes when we first started talking about DevOps, we started talking about developers basically forcing operations to meet their needs and work under them almost. I mean, and I talked to one of my friends who is an IT person, and he said to me, I hate the term. Because he's like, and he's not somebody who's unreasonable. He gets into new technology, gets into many different things, but he said, we have certain things we have to do to make sure it's operational. And they're telling us we have to start delivering right now, and under their demand, that they're just going to deploy right immediately, and just going to send it out, and it's going to be, what about all of our tests to make sure that it's actually secure, that it's these other things? So I think there's some, when we first started doing DevOps, we started saying we can deliver with these tools immediately. IT people had a reason to push back and say, the operations people really, right? Had a reason to push back. So I think you have to have those discussions. You have to figure out what is really needed and what was just, for lack of a better term, legacy in your processes, right? What are the things that you didn't need but you were doing? And those are the types of discussions that have to happen amongst those groups to make it work. I do think that there is still, some people sometimes run into problems where they have legacy systems, and again, mainframe, I'm talking AS400, and they don't realize the slowdown that's going to occur to have the APIs be exposed from that. So they're yelling at these developers on the mainframe side, and they're saying, well, you have to build a facade, we have to do this, we have to do that. So there are some things that can be automated to make it faster for some of the technical side that they just say is easy. It's not always easy when it's an old mainframe you're trying to do it with. It's easy when it's two systems that are sort of, both already built for DevOps in that sense, and you're just trying to get an API between them. So there is some technical part. But I agree with you that the people part, you have to have those discussions, you have to look at the process and understand it, just like we did for Agile to break down silos inside our own development teams. That's why it's the next phase of Agile in many ways. Okay, we just about ready?